These times are strange, it's quite surreal. It's never been like this. Remembering the good old days when we could hug and kiss. We'd pack the gyms and restaurants and move through public settings. We'd give high fives and drink at dives, hold hands and dance at weddings. Now the days are longer, yet the darker in a way. We're pressing pause on normalcy, just going day by day. But we can still make jokes and art, garden, dance and sing. Cook, read books, try on fun looks and learn about new things. We can talk with friends of ours and have a heart to heart, just so long as we all stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you, 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical, so step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to Sunday Night Stories, brought to you by 6 Feet Apart Productions. My name's Regina Stoops. I'll be your host for this evening, and we are very excited to bring you our first ever traditional storytelling special. Now, the true personal stories that you've heard here over the past several weeks, those are true, and there's something that happened in somebody's lives, but the stories that you're going to hear tonight are more in the genre of the traditional folk tale. So you're being asked to not really focus on the facts. It's more the imagination is going to be put to work. You know, the true stories, you're thinking about the facts and what the person's saying. And these stories, more like fables, folk tales, they are going to take you to a place in your mind. So you need to use your imagination on these and just sit back and enjoy the ride. We have 3 storytellers tonight, and each is going to tell a unique tale. And these tales are going to take you out of reality and the way things are in this day and age. It would be nice to step out of reality a little bit. So, step out of reality and take a grand adventure. Now, we know that this is a very different experience being online and going to a show online. We're getting used to it, but still it is different than being out in a theater setting. So we want you to just relax, get yourself a beverage, get a nice comfy chair, enjoy these stories. Now, there won't be any real X-rated language, but we can't really guarantee that it's all good for maybe a younger audience. So just think about that and who's sitting around the room with you tonight. But regardless, these are going to be very, very fun and entertaining folk tales, traditional tales. I'm really excited to hear what these storytellers have to say, what kind of adventures we're going to get to go on. Now, our first storyteller has told stories from Washington, D.C. to India, at camps, theaters, churches, all around the country, all around the world. And he believes that these tales are way, way, way too much fun for just a children's audience. So he seeks out adult audience to tell these stories, because really these stories are ageless. They're timeless and they're ageless. So I'm really excited, very happy to bring to you, please give a warm virtual welcome to our first storyteller, Tim Araneta.
All right. Thank you so much, Regina. I'm excited to start off our evening with our first story. And this story begins, like so many stories, once upon a time. There was a prince who had no troubles in his life at all until this one particular day his father came to him and said, "My son, it's time you were married. Today you will choose your bride." But father, I always thought you would do that for me. "Follow me," said the king. Now the king led the prince up to a tower in their castle, and the king unlocked a door to a room in which the prince had never been allowed before. So he stepped into the room, and there All around the room were windows, stained glass windows, each one the portrait of a princess. Each one beautiful, each one so lifelike. They seemed to be speaking to him. There was a fair one, there was a dark one. She was plump, she was thin, she had freckles. And as he leaned in to look at them, he could hear them almost speak. Pick me, I'd be a good queen. Choose me, I'd be a good partner. But the prince noticed right away that one window was not like the others. The 12th window had a curtain drawn across it. And when he pulled it back, there was something different about the young woman in that painting, in that stained glass portrait. She had sat for the portrait with her eyes cast down at the floor. And if this portrait might be speaking, the prince heard it say, "Don't bother with me, I'm probably not worth it." "Father, tell me about the woman in that stained glass window." "Son, I want you to listen to me carefully. There are 11 other women here to choose from. Look at those windows and tell me if one of them doesn't steal your heart." And the prince dutifully looked at each of those 11 windows, but he couldn't stop thinking about the melancholy princess. And so he said, "Father, tell me." "Very well. That young woman was kidnapped from her castle 4 months ago, taken by the wizard of the Iron Castle, and since then, no one has seen her or knows where she is." "Well, then I will go and find her, and if I do, she will be my bride." "Very well," said the king, "but I fear I may never see you again." The prince gathered his things. He said goodbye to his father and his mother, and he set off full of hope, full of adventure. And he went asking everyone he met, "Do you know where the wizard in the Iron Castle lives?" But no one did. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, and months turned into a year. At last, one day in desperation, nearly at the end of all hope, he just sat down on the side of the road. He put his head in his hands and he began to moan. Now, my friends, I should tell you, on this very day, on this very road, and seeing the prince sobbing into his hands there, came 3 travelers. One was long and slender, one was short and stout, and another had a blindfold over his eyes. They approached the young man and asked him what was wrong, and he explained to them what he was doing, who he was looking for, and he began to moan again. "Allow us to help you in your quest," said the long, slender man. No, don't trouble yourselves. I'm on a fool's errand." "Ah, but we may prove to be of some use to you, for we have some abilities." And the long, slender man doffed his hat and bent down low in a bow. And then he stood up, straightening, taller and taller and taller, until he stretched 3 times as tall as the nearest tree. And then he snapped back down to normal size. "My name is Long, and I am at your service." "Well," said the prince, "Long, I'm very glad to have you along." And that's when the second man stepped forward, the short, stocky man. "I am broad, and I can be as broad as I need to. Let me show you. Step back, if you please. No, farther, farther." And as he did so, as the prince stepped back, Broad began to grow larger and larger, rounder and rounder, until he pushed his friends off of the road and began to crowd the trees on the other side. Then he snapped back to normal size. "Well, friend Broad, I am very glad to make your acquaintance. But your friend with the blindfold? I don't see how a blind man can help me." "Ah, you mistake my blindfold for that of someone who is blind. But I wear this cloth around my head because I can see all too well. My name is Sharpsight, and even with this blindfold, I can see 100 miles in that direction an iron castle, inside of which is a man in a long black robe with a long dark beard. Behind him, a princess, very sad and melancholy, matching the description of the one you have told us about." Well, then, Sharpsight, I am very glad to make your acquaintance. If you'll help me, I would be so grateful." And so the prince and his new companions made their way to that iron castle. And there was no road to get there. As best they could, they made their way in a straight line, but there were many obstacles in their way. They came to a deep and rushing cold river, too far, too wide to jump across or swim across. But Long merely stretched himself long, reached out his arms, wrapped his friends in them, stepped across in a single stride, and put them down on the other side. When they came to a forest where the trees grew thick, so thick they could not fit between them, well, Broad merely made himself broad, wider and wider, until the tree snapped beneath his enormous girth. And when at last they came to a great mountain range, too long to go around and too steep to climb, Sharpsight merely lifted his blindfold, stared straight and true into the heart of that mountain. So powerful was his gaze that he drilled a hole right through that mountain. And so, in a matter of days, the prince and his friends were in the land of the Iron Castle. I wish I could tell you it was a welcoming place, but it was not. No signs of life. Nothing grew there. The grass was brown and dry. The leaves on the trees were gone. There was no water in the creeks, no sound of birds or bees, only the dust beneath their footsteps. When at last they approached the castle, the iron gate creaked open, and the prince, Long, Broad, and Sharpsight walked in. There was no one to greet them. And the prince thought it was very strange, the decorations in the castle, a lot of very lifelike statues of other princes, of search parties, men at arms, and knights. Funny, I wouldn't decorate a castle that way. They came into the dining room, and lo and behold, there was hot food on the table. They waited for a host, but when none came, they helped themselves, and when they had eaten their fill, into the room strode the wizard. He was bald on top with a long, dark beard, and he wore a long, black robe. And where you or I might have a belt around our middle, the wizard had 3 iron rings. Behind him was the princess. I know why you have come, but you must prove yourself worthy before I release the princess into your care. I will give you a test each night. I will leave her here in your company. When I return in the morning, when the first rays of sun come through that window and fall on the floor there, if she is not here safe and sound, I will turn you all into stone. The wizard left the room, and the prince immediately explained himself to the princess, how he had hoped to bring her home. But the princess would not meet his eyes. She would not smile. She did not say a word. She'd heard this kind of speech before. Well, the friends made preparations to spend the night in that room. Broad stuck himself in the doorway and began to widen himself so that not even a mouse could get through. Long stretched himself out as long as he could, bent over and wrapped himself around the room so that nothing could get in the windows without him feeling it. And Sharpsight agreed to keep the first watch. Meanwhile, in another part of the castle, the wizard had no intention of making this a fair challenge. He murmured an incantation, and a deep sleep came over the prince and his companions. The wizard came into the room, took the princess away, and hid her. The next morning, as the sky began to lighten, the prince woke up and saw that the princess was gone. Friends, wake up! We must find the princess. Sharpsight, any sign of her? There, 100 miles in that direction, it's a great forest. In the middle of that forest is an oak tree. At the top of the oak tree is an acorn. That single acorn is the princess. But it's 100 miles away, said the prince. Leave that to me, said Long, and he stretched his legs out the window, covered that 100 miles in just 3 steps. He plucked the acorn, turned around, 3 steps back into the room, put the acorn on the floor. Poof, there was the princess, just in time as the first ray of sunlight came in through the window. And as it did so, in strode the wizard. His brow furrowed as he saw the princess there. He had not been expecting this. He grew angry. Bang! One of those iron hoops about his middle burst and clang fell to the floor. You will not be so lucky a second time. That night, when the wizard delivered the princess into their care, the friends agreed they would stay up all night if they had to, and the prince recounted every riddle, every story he had ever heard to get his friends to stay awake. But it was no match for the wizard's spell, and once again they all fell asleep. Once again, the wizard took the princess away and hid her. And as the sky began to lighten in the morning, the prince woke up. Sharpsight, where is she? There. 200 miles in that direction is a great mountain. Inside that mountain is a stone. Inside that stone is a diamond. The princess is that diamond. But it's 200 miles away. Leave that to us, said Long. And Long grabbed Sharpsight under one arm, stepped out the window with his long, long legs. In just 6 steps, covered the 200 miles. Sharpsight lifted his blindfold, stared into the heart of the mountain, bang, bursting it into 100 million pieces of rock. He picked out one, stared at it, bang, there was the diamond. 6 steps back into the castle. They put the diamond on the floor. Poof, there was the princess, just in time. Because in through the window came that first ray of sunlight. In strode the wizard. His face grew red when he saw that the princess was safe and sound. Bang! That second iron hoop fell off his chest. Clang! Fell to the ground. That third night, he left the princess with them one more time. They agreed that they would sing every song they knew as loud as they could. They would spend all night dancing every step they knew, but it was no use. The wizard put them to sleep. He took the princess out of there. As the sky began to lighten in the morning, the prince woke up. Sharpsight, do something! There, my friend, I can see 300 miles in that direction is a great sea. At the bottom of the sea is a shell. Inside that shell is a ring. The princess is that ring. At the bottom of the sea? Once again, we are at your service, said Long. He picked up Sharpsight under one arm, Broad under the other, traveled that 300 miles in just 9 steps. Broad knelt down at the edge of the sea and began to drink. And as he drank the water in, and as he grew wider and wider, the level of that sea got lower and lower and lower, until at last, exposed there for all to see, were millions of shells. But Sharpsight, he could see exactly the one he wanted. He reached over, he opened it up, took that ring, gave it to Long. Long put it in his pocket, picked up Sharpsight under one arm, Broad under the other, turned to walk those 9 steps back to the castle. But, my friends, he had forgotten that Broad was a little bit heavier than he had been on the trip there. For see, he still had the entire sea in his belly, and so Long stumbled, he tripped, he dropped his friends. The sea came rushing out of Broad's mouth, and the 3 companions were tossed and turned in the wave until Long, with his long arms, could grab them back, stand up, and carry them safely to shore. But valuable time had been lost. Back at the castle, the first ray of sunlight came in and hit the floor. The wizard strode in. There was no princess. The wizard smiled. You, my friend, you lose. And he raised his hands to turn the prince into stone. But at that moment, a ring came sailing in the window. For hadn't Sharpsight been watching from 300 miles away? Hadn't he told Long what was going on? Hadn't Long reached into his pocket, stretched out a long arm, and thrown that ring 300 miles, where it sailed through that window, landed on the floor, poof, there was the princess. And in mid-spell, just about to turn the prince into stone, the wizard saw the princess, turned purple with rage. Bang! That third iron hoop about his middle broke and fell with a clang to the floor, and where there had been an angry wizard in a black robe in that room, there was now a flock of ravens, confused and angry, fluttering about in all directions, and then out the window, never to be seen again. And now the princess made eye contact with the prince, and for the first time in a long time, she smiled. They were soon joined by Long, Broad, and Sharpsight, who climbed in through the window, and soon the castle was alive with laughter and conversation from a lot of knights and young princes and men-at-arms who had been turned to stone, but now were living beings again. They all made their way back to the kingdom where the princess lived. They told the whole story to her family, and a wedding was arranged. The wedding feast between the prince and the formerly melancholy princess lasted for 2 weeks, and the chocolate cake was so good you should have been there. They had a kind of a raspberry coulis in the center. I would have saved you a piece, but I ate it. I couldn't help myself. After the wedding, the prince and princess, they asked Long, Broad, and Sharpsight to stay on as honored guests, but they declined. We are needed elsewhere. With great power comes great responsibility. And so Long, Broad, and Sharpsight bade the prince and princess farewell. And as far as I know, the prince and princess lived happily ever after. And if you are ever in need of help and you find yourself out on a lonesome road somewhere, may you be lucky enough to run into Long, Broad, and Sharpsight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was great, Tim. And, on the behalf of princesses everywhere, I'm really grateful to the prince and all of the people who came to rescue one of my fellow princesses. It's always tough. We're always getting taken away and put in a tower and just held for no particular reason by some evil person. So, we need a lot of people to come and rescue us. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Our next storyteller tells myths and folk tales for modern adults as well as young adults. And she likes to find the personal in the storytelling and go from the once upon a time to the happily ever after. And she likes to put her own little twist on these stories. She also happens to own a Kaleidoscope Coffee in Richmond, California, which is a coffee house, clearly, and also a performance space. And we're excited because once we can all get together in a performance space, we're going to bring Sunday Night Stories to Kaleidoscope Coffee. So stay tuned. But now I'm really happy to bring up to our virtual stage, Cassie Cushing. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cassie. I am so excited to be here with you, to share stories with all of you. I'm imagining all of your faces from near and far and everywhere in between stretched out in front of me. Because as they say, these are weird times, and in these weird times, we could all probably use a little extra imagination. So let's imagine together. Even during the best of times, on a deep, dark, foggy night, it's easy to become superstitious. The youngest daughter, the youngest sister, sat looking out her window. She had her knitting. It was a deep, dark, foggy night, and these were not the best of times. Already, her two sisters had gone missing, and now it was just her and her mother, who was a widow, who slept. Sleep never came to her. Sleep would not be her companion, but sleep was the one solace that her mother had left. And so the youngest daughter sat awake at night with her knitting, looking out the window. And as the youngest, she was never given to flights of fancy. She was always the last to learn anything, the last to be taught anything, and she felt like she had something to prove. And flights of fancy were a luxury that she just couldn't afford, so superstition did not come easy to her. But as the fog crept in, closer and thicker and darker, and those vast, shallow, rolling hills that surrounded their humble cottage also seemed to crowd in a little bit closer, none of the practical explanations made any sense. They grew up in these hills. These hills were an extension of who they were. There was no way that they wandered off and sunk into a bog that they didn't know was there, or tripped and fell off the edge of a cliff. They knew these hills. These hills were so desolate, bandits didn't even come. She hoped with bitterness that maybe they left, that this lonely life, that that the four of them together just wasn't enough. And of course, as the youngest, she got left behind. But that was hope. Because any alternative, she couldn't bring herself to imagine as she sat there, looking out the window. The fog began to take shape and solidify, and then she saw it. The horse that kept coming, as if they hadn't already lost enough. This horse would come in to their garden and eat the few vegetables that they had left. So she leapt up to her feet, and with her knitting still in her hand, she bolted out the door, waving her knitting through the air. Just get out of here and leave us alone. And she struck at the horse. Her knitting stuck to the side of the horse. She couldn't pull it off, and much to her dismay, as the horse reared up and took off through those hills, her hand was also stuck to her knitting. She couldn't let go, so she was carried over those hills, bumped on stones, deeper and deeper and deeper into the fog, until she lost track of everything. The horse reared up again. She was thrown to the ground, her heart thumping in her ears, the wind whistling and whispering around her, the mist spitting on her. The wind seemed to take on a voice of its own. Open, open, open. Her heart was thumping in her ears. Her whole body was shaking. She could feel the ground even beneath her shaking, and the earth itself added its voice to that of the wind. Open! Open, oh green hills, for the king's son. Open, open, oh green hills, for the widow's daughter. And there was a bright flashing light. She could see nothing, but she could feel. The ground was not the ground anymore. She could feel smooth stones worn by age and footsteps. Slowly, her eyes adjusted to the brightness of the light, and she could make out a figure, a young man, kneeling down in front of her, his eyes warm with welcome and soft with concern. He held out a hand. You are frightened. It is a miracle that you are here. I will take care of you, and perhaps you can also help me with a problem that I have. So he scooped her up, and he led her to the sitting room where a fire was blazing warm in the hearth. He piled furs upon her lap, gave her a warm mug of milk, and then he took off her boots and he began to wash her feet there in front of that blazing hearth. She couldn't quite bring herself to forget that cold fog that was somewhere just outside, but she could feel the warmth working on her. She could feel herself nodding off. He looked up at her. You're so tired. Come, you must rest. We will talk more in the morning. And he whisked her down the hall to a room where the pillows were downy soft and fragranced with dried lavender and rose petals. She had the best night's sleep that she had ever had in her entire life. The next morning, she woke up feeling refreshed, and there was the young man by her bedside with another warm glass of milk, his eyes bright and shining with the new day. You slept well, I hope. You are my honored guest, and I'm sad, but I must leave you for the moment. But you will be safe here, and you will be taken care of. I will leave you with my keys. And he pulled out a ring with pewter and silver keys all around, and he handed them to her. They jangled a little bit. Take my keys. My home is your home, and you are safe here. Explore to your heart's desire. But this key, and he held up a golden key. This key leads to my personal room, of course, you understand. I do hope that you would not go in there. And with that, he gave her the keys. She picked them up. That gold key had little fancy scroll work on it. She'd never seen anything quite like it before. He left, and she was left to explore the castle. She found the dining hall, the table laden with breakfast, strong, hearty tea, slabs of bacon that were crispy around the outside but meaty and juicy in the middle, an abundance of eggs, fruit that was sweet and dripping. She explored the castle, from one end to the other, from the upper floors to the lower floors, and she saw wonders. In one room, there were wardrobes lining the entire perimeter, and as she opened each one, there were gowns upon gowns, some made of heavy velvet and others of light flowing silk, gowns for all occasions, dripping in jewels, threaded with gold. Another room was filled with chests, and when she opened them, gold, jewels, rubies, diamonds, pearls, chests filled this room. The youngest daughter explored from the top of the castle to the bottom of the castle. She found herself in one last dark, dank hallway. There was a door at the far end. And compared to all the rest, it was rather drab, it was rather plain, just simple planks of wood. The hallway was dark, except for just a sconce on the wall with a few tapered candles in it. And there was one key that she hadn't used yet. She looked at this door that didn't match everything else, and she looked at the key that didn't match the door. His private chambers. And she stuck it in the lock. She tried to turn it and it stuck a little bit. She could hear the screeching of metal upon metal as she twisted this key and the bolt slowly made its way open. She pushed the door. It was heavy. And on the other side, it was dark. The first thing she noticed was the smell. It was sharp and musty and dank and dry all at the same time. She grabbed a candle from off the wall sconce. She held it up and shadows danced away from her. As she stepped inside, she could feel her foot squelching on something wet. And as those shadows danced away from her, she could see blood thickly covering the floor. And where she was standing, it was still wet. And in other areas, it was sticky. And in other areas, still, it was dry and crackly. She held the candle up. She could see what this room was filled with. Lining the walls, stacked high, were the bodies of women. And she recognized the finery of those gowns that they were wearing. Piled high were the bodies of women, and every single one of them was missing a head, and she saw the pile of heads. She saw in front of her the most recent victims, and she recognized her two sisters. She fell to her knees. The candles sputtered and went out. She tried to hold them close, her gown getting covered in blood. I have to get out of here. And she turned and she ran down that hallway. Somehow she found herself in the kitchen and she tore off her dress. She threw it in the fire. She was trying to get the blood off her foot. But the more she scrubbed at the blood, the worse it became. As if it was starting to crawl up her ankle, and she kept scrubbing and she kept scrubbing. But the blood wouldn't go away, and now it was slowly making its way up her calf. She was sobbing and crying when she felt a coarse roughness brush up against her. She looked down. A cat had wandered in from outside. It was scrawny, its skin hanging on its bones, its eyes were goopy, and it cried the piteous, most pitiful cry. Missing bits of fur. She said, I can't help you. And she tried to push it away, but it only came more insistent and cried more pitifully and more loudly. Well, maybe at least one of us can be saved. And she got up and she started going through the cupboards until she found a saucer and she found milk. And she knew milk wasn't the best for cats, but it was all she had. So she gave the cat some milk. And then she crawled over to the fireplace and she tried to grab the dried ashes, thinking, well, maybe if I can get the blood to dry, I can scrape it off then. And so she was dousing her foot and her ankle and her leg in ashes when she felt a soft hand on her shoulder. She turned and the cat was gone. And instead, there was a beautiful woman. You are frightened, I know. I have been placed under a terrible curse. I am the owner of this castle. That man is not a prince. If you listen to me, we can get out of this together. He must die. The young woman showed her where there was a salve hidden back in one of the farthest reaches of one of the cupboards. You can use this to heal your sisters. You can't save them all, don't try. But you can bring back your sisters. They made a plan. Later that night, the young man came home. Did you enjoy my house? His eyes bright and sparkling. Come, we shall rest by the fire. And he led her into the fireplace and piled furs upon her. He said, I'm so happy to have this time with you. I missed you while I was gone. And he brought her another warm mug of milk. He took off her slippers. She had gotten a fresh gown from upstairs and put on satin slippers. He took off her slippers, and much to his delight and her own surprise, her feet were already clean. He beamed up at her. Yes, you are the one. You are the one I have waited for. You are the one I can trust. You will listen to me, and we will be happy together. We will get married. Well, the next day, the young man also had to go out, and he once again left the youngest daughter with the care of his keys. And she immediately set to work. She grabbed the salve. She went back down to that plain drab door, the dank room, and she found her sisters' bodies. She spread the ointment on their shoulders. She spread the ointment on their heads. When everything was back where it belonged, life returned, and with life came tears and some manic laughter and more tears, but there wasn't a lot of time to spare. So they rushed up to one of the other rooms. They went to the room with the chests filled with gold and pearls and diamonds. They emptied out 3 of them. And when the young man came home that night, smiling, his eyes bright, hello, my darling. I wish I could share your happiness, she said, but I cannot marry you until I know that my mother is taken care of. She is all alone in these hills. I never even knew my father, and now she's lost her 3 daughters. I cannot marry you until I know she's been taken care of, but I have prepared these care packages for her. Please, will you bring them to her? Oh, my darling, of course. And the next day, the young man once again set forth, and he carried on his back the first chest with the eldest daughter inside. And on the next day, he carried back the second chest. And on the third day, he carried back the third chest. And he came home beaming, his face bright. I have done as you asked. Now we can be married. And the girl sat looking out the window and didn't say a word. And he grew troubled. He said, why are you not happy? I have done everything that you asked. And she sat looking out the window and she didn't say a word. She didn't even move. Well, now storm clouds were gathering in the young man's eyes. As he stalked across the room, he reached up and grabbed her by her hair to whip her around. And as he did, the head flew off, straw went everywhere, and he knew what had happened. He flew into a rage unlike any other. He was no longer a handsome prince or a horse, a gray wild horse. He was an ugly, hideous ogre with skin that crawled green and cracked parched as he ran through those hills, his mouth a gaping maw of terror. The widow and her 3 daughters were in their humble cottage. They had stoked up the fire in the hearth. They had put pokers in it until they were glowing hot and red. They could hear the screams coming from a long way off as the monster tore through those hills. And when he burst through the door, the youngest daughter, the youngest sister was there ready with a poker, and she ran him through the whole room filled with smoke. They could see nothing for a moment, and when the smoke cleared, the monster was gone. A few days later, they were visited by that beautiful woman from the castle. She invited them to come with her back to her home, where they could all keep each other company. And on dark, cold nights, when the fog crept in thick, they stoked up the fire because they knew they had killed at least one monster. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Cassie. Hey, I think we can all agree that there are some red flags when you're dating someone or getting to know someone, and I'm pretty sure a room filled with headless women and blood is a big red flag, and you probably walk away from that guy. So I'm really glad that those gals got out. So I love a happy ending. So thank you so much for that. So our next storyteller has been gaining accolades for over 20 years, and he's told stories all over the country, including at the National Storytelling Festival. And in addition to being the director of storytelling at Stagebridge in Oakland, he is also on the board of Tell It on Tuesday through the Marsh, if you're familiar with the Marsh. And actually, he's going to be appearing at Tell It on Tuesday, this Tuesday. And you can find out information about that at tellitontuesday.org. So I am very, very happy to bring you another wonderful story and a wonderful storyteller. So please welcome Kirk Waller.
All right, good evening, everybody. So, shelter in place or not, summer is coming. And I don't know about you, but I can't wait. Look forward to summer. And there was this boy, Deshaun. Oh man, he loved summertime. He loved it for the reasons you and I mean, he loved just hanging out, going to the beach, going on vacation, or doing nothing at all. Summertime. But he loved summer because it gave him the opportunity to do the one thing that he loved to do more than anything else. That one thing that he got to do more of in summer was eat treats. Sugar, candy to be more specific, anything that was sugary, anything that was sweet, Deshaun was there. Matter of fact, his friends, they called him Sugar Deshaun. When they saw him coming down the street, they said, "Hey, here comes Sugar Deshaun." You see, he would have candy wrappers hanging out his pockets, popsicle sticks coming out of every crease, crumbs on his shirt and pants, chocolate on every fingertip. Matter of fact, if Sugar was a girl, he would have married her. Deshaun loved Sugar. Now, his mom and papa, they weren't so excited about his love affair with Sugar. Matter of fact, his mama would say, "Boy, he eats too much sugar. Bad for your teeth, bad for your belly, bad for your blood. It's bad for you." And his father, he would chime in and he'd say, "What she said, bad for you." And so he had a little brother. His name was John John. John John tried not to get involved in the family sugar wars. I mean, he liked his occasional cookies or cake, but he also liked John John. I mean, he also liked Deshaun. I mean, for brothers, got along pretty good. One day, his mom was getting ready to have some friends over that afternoon, a little tea of sorts. And so she was cleaning up, vacuuming. And right before she was getting ready to clean up the house, she remembered something very important. She went to the kitchen, she opened up the cupboard, she took out this green and yellow box, and she said, "Deshaun, come here." And she just held the box. Deshaun was like, "Yeah, mama. You see this box? Yeah, don't touch this box. You see, inside the box was powdered sugar lemon drop cookies. Powdered sugar lemon drop cookies was a favorite of everyone in the house. John was in love with powdered sugar lemon drop cookies. He liked the way when you bit into them, that crisp cookie crunch would just pierce the air. And that lemon filling, that perfect blend of sweetness and tartness would spill over his teeth and explode into his taste buds. And then the powdered sugar would float into the air and then land on his cheeks like fairy dust. Deshaun loved powdered sugar lemon drop cookies. His mama said, Deshaun, don't touch them. Oh, Mama, I wouldn't. Don't even look at them. Yes, Mama. And so she went to finish cleaning up the room and she started vacuuming. And through that annoying whir of the vacuum, she thought she heard the sound. You know the sound. Yeah, every kid knows the sound. Every adult knows the sound. It is universal, the sound of some crackly, crispy treat being opened up. And she turned off the vacuum, and it was silent. Then she turned it back on, and there it was. She heard it again. Deshaun, and he was like, huh? Now, I got to tell you this. Deshaun said, huh, for only one of two reasons. Either said, huh, because he got caught doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. And he just needed a few more seconds to get out of doing what he wasn't supposed to be doing. Or he said, huh, because he got caught doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. And he just needed a few more seconds to finish up doing what he wasn't supposed to be doing. And she said, don't you harm me, young man. Get in here right now. So as quick as he could, put the cookies away, brushed off his shirt, brushed off his hands. And he said, yes, Mama. Boy, don't you yes, Mama me. And she looked. Is that powdered sugar lemon drop cookies on your cheeks? He forgot to wipe off his cheeks. And he said, huh? That's it. I've had it. You and this sugar, you've gone too far. Okay, so look. This is what we're going to do, Deshaun. For 1 week, you cannot have anything sweet. Now, Deshaun was 9 years old. And she said, for 1 week, you cannot have any sugar, not one grain. And if I find out that you cannot have any sugar until you are 18 years old. Mama, that's 19? No, 9 years. 1 week, 9 years. You decide. So Deshaun, he was determined. He could do this. So he went into his room. He closed the door. And he did really, really good for like the first 15 minutes. And then he started breaking out in sweats. He started looking at the candy wrappers on the floor. He started smelling sugar that wasn't there. And then somehow, he got through those first few hours. And then the first day. And you know how it is when you're working on that one thing really, really hard, and you get past that first period, those first few days, and then somehow it becomes a little bit easier. Third day, fourth day, and by sheer will and not wanting to be punished and go without sugar, he made it through the whole week. That afternoon, his mama was standing there at his door, just grinning and smiling. You did it, Deshaun. I'm proud of you. And if he were honest, he was pretty proud of himself, too. You know what? To celebrate, when your father gets home, we're going to go to Uncle Wong's Chinese restaurant. And then after that, Mom's Donuts. Now, Uncle Wong's Chinese restaurant, not super special. They went there every Friday night, kind of like family tradition. But Mom's Donuts, oh, Mom's Donuts. They had these donuts were big as round as a Frisbee and huge and fluffy and flaky. They had these ice cream scoops that was round as a basketball and jammed with sugar and frosted, flaky, crunchy, fruity things. And it was so delicious. So they went to Uncle Wong's Chinese restaurant. Of course, he ordered sweet and sour chicken. They finished eating, and Deshaun was like, okay. Can we go now? Can we go to Mom's Donuts? Can we go? I'm ready for my treat for my reward. And his dad said, hold on. You know, they have to bring the check. Then Deshaun forgot about this silly ritual that they would always do. They bring the check, and they bring fortune cookies. And everybody would have to open up their cookie, read the fortune out loud, and say some silly saying about it. So his father was, a penny saved is a penny earned. Now that's a rich fortune. His mother was like, friendship is as good as gold. And she thought about her friends and the tea that she had earlier in the week. John opened his up. Blood is thicker than water, and the brother is always there. And he thought about Deshaun. For brothers, they got along pretty good. Okay, Deshaun, come on, open up yours. And so he had this trick that he would play. What Deshaun would do is he would take the fortune cookie and he would stuff the whole thing in his mouth. I've got. And very carefully, he would crunch on the outside of the cookie. He would reach his finger outside and try to bring the fortune out without getting any spit on it. Successful. And he looked at it and he folded it up, put it in his pocket. Just some silly lottery ticket numbers or something. And so, can we go now? And they were, all right, let's go. So they went to Mom's Donuts, and Deshaun ordered this big glazed donut. It just melted. Oh, when he bit into it. His brother, John, ordered this big scoop of strawberry ice cream, jammed with sprinkles and fresh strawberries. And then they decided that they would split it. So John took half of his ice cream, Deshaun took half of his donut, and they each traded off and splished it together, and it was like a donut ice cream heavenly delight. When they got home that evening, everybody eventually went to bed, Deshaun's mother, his father, John. But Deshaun, he couldn't sleep. See, he kept looking at that fortune. The reason why he couldn't read it out loud, the reason why he couldn't quite understand it, it wasn't like just some silly saying. It said, you may have one wish. I mean, could that be true? I mean, really have a wish? I mean, what would you wish for if you had one wish and no wishing for more wishes? And so Deshaun thought over and over again, just one wish. He had to make it good, but he couldn't think of anything. So he restlessly finally went off to sleep. But the next morning, he woke straight up and he knew exactly what he would wish for. I wish that everything was sweet, that everything I touch becomes a treat. Here's wishing. Crumpled up, threw it in the trash can, and he went to start his day. He went in the bathroom and he grabbed his old crusty red and white toothbrush, put his bubblegum toothpaste on it, and he went to brush his teeth. Ugh! And it was like hard as a rock. He thought maybe he forgot to rinse it out the night before. Yeesh. He was like, shh. Did it again, and felt like he almost chipped a tooth. But he looked, and he thought he caught the slight smell of peppermint. And he tasted his toothbrush. And it tasted like peppermint. Okay. And then he took the little cups, the little Dixie cup that he had in the bathroom, turned on the water, turned off the water, looked inside, and it was like bubbling and popping and fizzing. It had turned into soda. Mama, this is going to be a good day. And so he ran in the kitchen, sat down for breakfast, and Mama had made bacon, eggs, and hash browns. Now, I don't know about you. Love bacon, eggs, and hash browns. Deshaun, he didn't love them because, they weren't sweet. And so this morning was different, though. He touched the bacon, touched the eggs, touched the hash browns, and then he picked up his fork, put in the egg whites, twirled around, put it in his mouth, and then it turned into warm, sweet marshmallow cream. He twirled it inside the egg yolk, let it drizzle like on his nose and his lips, on his chin, and he ate it, and it was like warm, thick caramel. And he put his fork in the hash browns, and when he put those in his mouth, sweet, delectable, shredded coconut. picked up the piece of bacon. You know how bacon has the light strips, dark strips, light strips, dark strips. When he bit it, milk chocolate, dark chocolate, milk chocolate, dark chocolate. He said, Mama, you are the best cook in the world. And she said, thank you. So when he finished eating, he went into the living room. His little brother was in there watching cartoons, and he picked up the remote because he had this trick that he would love to do on his brother. He would turn off the TV or change the channel and then run out the room. It would drive his brother crazy. And he'd do it again and again and again. So he picked the remote, you know, a little black remote with little colored buttons on it. And he'd click, 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 click. But the remote wasn't working. He had just changed the battery, so he knew it was working. He click, click, click. It seemed to be stuck. And then when he went to click it the last time, he noticed the remote control smelled like black licorice. And the little multicolored buttons, they tasted like fruit flavored candy. And then he said, oh no, everything I touch becomes a treat, whether I want it to or not. Now, his mama was in the doorway, kind of watching this whole scene, and she said, Deshaun, baby, are you okay? Come here, let me feel your forehead. Let me see if you have a fever. You've been acting strange all day. Come here. No, mama, get away from me. Boy, you better get over here right now. No, mama. And he backed up. He tripped over this slipper that was left in the middle of the living room floor, fell over the arm of the couch, and landed right in the lap of his little brother, John John. John John's eyes grew big. His hands stiffened and glazed over. And right in front of their eyes, he turned into a little chocolate brother. His mama said, what happened to John John? And so Deshaun had to tell him about the fortune and the toothbrush and the water and the bacon, eggs, and hash brown. And John John, you turned my son into a candy bar? So Deshaun was heartbroken. He went into his room, he strumbled through the trash, and he picked up the fortune, but clearly it said you can only have one wish. He went to the bathroom, he closed the door behind him, and he began to cry. Tears rolled down his cheeks. For brothers, they got along pretty good. And those tears, when they splashed on that fortune, the paper just kind of dissolved in Deshaun's fingertips. And he sadly went to put his toothbrush away, and it strangely looked a lot like his crusty red and white toothbrush from the night before. And he smelled like his crusty red and white toothbrush. And he picked up the water. The soda had stopped fizzling. It had become water again. Somehow his tears, his love for his brother had somehow reversed everything. He ran into the living room where his mom was draped over to John John, just crying. She said, Mama, I think I could help. He reached out and he touched his little fingers. They began to soften and move. He opened his eyes and looked at him and he said, I had the weirdest dream. And his mama said, let me guess, chocolate? And she said, oh, come here, you two, come here. And she gave her boys a big hug. She said, you know what, John, Deshaun, I'm so glad you're Deshaun. Thank you, whatever you did, we have you back. When your father gets home, we're gonna go straight to Mom's Donuts. You boys could get whatever you want. Deshaun looked up at his mama and he said, no thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kurt. That was a great story. I got to tell you, that was, I could relate. That's all, well, you know what else this is good for, by the way? Hang on just one second. Give me a bit. All right, it's really good for cutting up a chocolate bar. I can relate to that story. I got to change that down for a minute or something. Let me just get a little, all right. That was good stuff. Good stories. Good stuff, everybody. All right. Hey, thank you so much, all three of you. It was a wonderful evening, wonderful stories. And I also want to say Thank you to our audience. Please give us some love in the live chat on YouTube. I know we've got a lot of comments, and we look forward to reading those comments. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for supporting us with your generosity, because it allows us to support our storytellers. And we're also giving a portion of the proceeds of this to the National Storytelling Association, and they in turn help support storytellers during this time, because there are storytellers who make their living doing this, and obviously they can't really do that given the current time. So they give out grants and donations to help support people, storytellers in need. So thank you for supporting us so that we can help support others. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing next week. Next week, we were going to be featuring authors storytelling. And so this is going to be 5 authors who are going to talk about recent books that they've published. And it's not an author's reading, it's authors that are telling stories about their books, from their books, including Aaliyah Voles, whose memoir, Home Baked, My Mom, Marijuana, and the Stoning of San Francisco, has just been optioned for a movie. So all of them are going to be great stories, great books, but please join us for that. I'd like to bring back our storytellers to give them just a little bit more love and a round of applause. So let's please give it up for the prince, the princess, the man, Tim Araneta.
Thank you, Regina. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed being on this Sunday night story concert. I'm glad you guys wanted to branch out and hear some traditional stories.
I am really happy that we did as well. I have a feeling this is not going to be the last time we do traditional storytelling. So please keep the love going for a wonderful story. And I think we've learned some valuable lessons, and I really loved it. So thank you very much, Cassie Cushing.
Regina, thank you so much. It was an honor and a pleasure to be here. I was supposed to have a storytelling show that was canceled when Shelter in Place happened. So it was really, really wonderful to be on here tonight and to get to share a story with probably a lot of people who don't usually get to hear me tell too. So, you know, technology is pretty cool. Thank you for everything that you're doing, and we look forward to all the future shows.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. And last and certainly not least, and don't forget, tellitontuesday.org. Let's give it up virtually for Kirk Waller, the man with the sugar.
Thank you so much, Regina. It was really fun telling with Tim and Cassie and having you as our wonderful host and MC. Thank you, 6 Feet Apart. Thanks for the stories.
You're very welcome. Thank you for all. Thank you for joining us. We're over and done, and we hope to see you all, or at least virtually, next week for Sunday Night Stories author storytelling. Thank you. Have a good evening. Have a good Memorial Day weekend.
6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you. 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical. So step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.